All right, we'll call this meeting of the Ordinance Committee to order. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Squire Downey.
Here.
Squire Blackford. Squire Gill. Judge
Here.
Executive K.
Yes. So I'm going to deviate from the agenda for the opportunity to have the events planner for the city of Versailles, Nola Serber, to come and give us an update on It's a Wonderful Woodford Christmas. So if you don't mind to turn on the mic there
I got it.
and let us know what's going on in our community.
Well, we are in full swing of the holiday season. We've been about 3 months into it. In front of you, I've put a packet. In that packet is all the calendars of what's going on for a wonderful Woodford Christmas. So we are promoting it week by week because it is a lot. We partnered with the city and the county, basically went this year and partnered with the chamber. So everything would be on one platform until we can redirect how everything looks with the county and the city and the chamber. I know there's been a lot of confusion about who's posting what or where do we find what's going on. So we've basically combined everything into one platform, and that's the wonderful Woodford Christmas that's in front of you. And this flyer right here, this went out in the water bill the 1st of November, so everyone could kind of have something in front of them with the calendar on it. We have 3 main events coming up. We have the tree lighting, December the 6th at 5:30 out here on Court Street. Chief Mike Murray and Sheriff Wilhoit and I have discussed the safety procedures for the event. Safety is our main concern as the events have been beyond our expectation, which is awesome. Making sure that the traffic coming off of Lexington Street is aware of the event on Court Street. We're going to have barriers set up and 2 officers standing out there. And we'll have an officer and a deputy on Court Street during that event. I've put in front of you kind of some of the movements of that program. And then the next day, there's all kinds of events going on all day long. We have the carriage rides going on. We have we have the parade, and James Kay and Phyllis Madeline and the new mayor, Laura Dake, will be doing the emceeing and the announcers for that. We do have the performance by K-State Band. And we're expecting a big turnout. We've already got a lot of floats. A lot. So I am here basically recommending that if any of the magistrates want to be in the float, I don't know what you all normally do to come together. If you already have a plan or if you want help with that, we'll put you in there. On the back here is a Christmas parade form, so if anybody's asking about that, they can go on our Facebook or our website and retrieve the parade form. And then on December the 14th, down at the district, we are doing a Christmas event. It's Versailles and Woodford County combined, the wonderful Woodford Christmas. And we are going to have Santa. It's noon to 5, sorry. Tim Goings is DJ with music, activities, food trucks, hot chocolate truck, free s'mores. The high school baseball team is hosting that, the fire pits and s'mores. Christmas themed bounce houses, ice skating rink, human-sized snow globe, free activities for the kids, crafts, the train. The carriage rides will also be there. That's all free. And the VMA and the Art Village is also hosting that, the train and the craft. So we got a lot going on around the community.
All right. So I believe that just Phyllis Mattingly and the new mayor, Laura Dake, are going to do the emceeing.
Okay.
I'm going to be behind the scenes.
Enjoying those kids.
Yeah. Great job, Nola. If you don't mind, I call you by your
Absolutely.
name. I mean, you've done a tremendous job in organizing and working on putting together an excellent season of events. And
Thank
the
you.
county is proud to be a partner with the city and helping make sure all this stuff comes through. And it is going to be a wonderful Woodford Christmas.
Yes, it is. We are really excited. And thank you again for letting me come and get everybody excited about it.
Absolutely. Do you all have any questions or anything about the Christmas plans and programming? Anybody want to volunteer to be on a float and parade? Barner semis, roll down the street. That'd look good out there.
Put some lights on it, go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I did realize I probably should have put Woodford on the back of them or the front of them, however.
Anybody have any questions for Nola? No? All right. Well, thank you for being here. I know you got
Welcome.
some family things to attend to. If you need anything from us, just let us know, but we're excited about it.
Thank
The
you.
season's already rocking and rolling. So
It
it's
is.
great.
Thank you all. Have you seen the tree?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. How can you miss it?
I know, she's a pretty one. I'm so proud of her.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving, Nola.
You too.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, members of the Ordinance Committee, for indulging us on the calendar to talk about Christmas before we get into our business. But we'll move on into, we have a text amendment and a map amendment for consideration. So I'm going to invite Director Steve Hunter from Planning and Zoning to come and talk about what is before us as an ordinance committee. And Director Hunter is also going to talk about the December Planning and Zoning meeting and some other updates for the court. Director Hunter, you mind to turn on your mic and the floor is yours.
Alrighty, and then Jordan, we're going to jump to that PowerPoint there. All right. So as the judge mentioned, you got two items here, and I appreciate you guys putting these on a separate meeting here so we can talk about these. The first one's a text amendment, and it went out to you all. I believe it's fairly lengthy, and I'll explain why, because really what we're adopting is not a whole lot of new language. It's more of a reorganization. And then, of course, we got this zoning map amendment that was also done at our last meeting. At the end, I'll talk about the next Planning Commission agenda, but that is at your seat already. This is the next meeting agenda, and it's big. I thought last month's meeting was big, or maybe a record. This probably tops it. So there should be agenda at your all seat, and we'll go through that in just a second. Because there's another text amendment coming your way that I think more of y'all have been interested in, but I want to go through this one. So this text amendment, before I get onto these slides here real quick, and I got a couple slides to help summarize these pages you got. This text amendment is mostly a housekeeping and reorganization text amendment, and this one started in the fall of 23, mostly at the City of Versailles' request. So Versailles has sent us directives since I've been here, about some housekeeping issues in the zoning ordinance. And the first one, the trigger point was we had a zone change on the south side of town, Springs of Versailles, and there was a traffic study that the developer did. It was a little bit debated how detailed it was. It was a level of service study. And I realized at that point in time that we don't actually require traffic studies in our zoning ordinance for zone changes. Traffic studies are mentioned in the comp plan indirectly, but we have no language in our zoning ordinance if someone comes in to zone a big project related to traffic studies. We've had traffic studies in the past that developers have done voluntarily, but there's not a standard that requires a trigger point. So that was one of the first directives I've got. We need to do something about traffic studies. And then after the short-term rental verbiage started, especially city side, there was some discussion about we're getting a lot of CUP applications, and property owners were saying, look, how come he got a letter and I didn't get a letter? So there was some discussion, could we do better notice for certain kind of hearings like CUPs and zone changes? So that's in here. And there's a few other things, and I'll point that out. But mostly this text amendment was reorganization. It started with me being new. I didn't understand why certain things were certain places of the book. It just didn't flow right from a readability standpoint. So before I show you this, and I just got a couple slides, and then I'll answer any questions you might have. The Planning Commission had an advisory committee meet on this text amendment September 30th, 2023, October 10th, 2023, December 14th, 2023, and December 28th, 2023. So we spent several hours on this reorganization project and incorporated some of those things I mentioned. And then we had a public hearing on this in February of 24, and we let it go over 3 months. So we introduced this text amendment in February and let it sit March and April. By the time we got to April, we got wind that the legislative folks were amending the statute for this medical cannabis verbiage. So at the last minute, we added the medical cannabis onto this text amendment so Versailles could consider that. And as you remember, we did it in 3 pieces. We did the same text amendment, City of Versailles first, and then we did it for Midway, and then we held it for the county because you all elected to put the medical cannabis verbiage on the ballot. And we really need to get through the ballot initiative to see how that shook out before you guys could do this. So the 2 cities have already adopted this verbatim. Versailles did it in June, and Midway did it in September. But again, I wanted to send you the whole text amendment. Initially, we were just going to send you the medical cannabis verbiage at the end of 5. But the problem there is we want the ordinance to kind of look alike for all the jurisdictions, and we wanted to get these housekeeping amendments county side too, as well as these new notice issues. So with that, I'm going to go to the screen real quick, and I just got a couple slides to show you. And the first one says, you know, why did we choose to amend these articles? Before we do, I thought it was interesting to let the court members know where do we get authority to regulate the zoning ordinance. And KRS 100 is what we call the planning and zoning statute. So we're used to that in my office and planners around the state. We talk about KRS 100 all the time. That's our statute. And KRS 100-201 is where we get the authority for the governments to basically enact zoning regulations, either on an interim or permanent basis. So that's the statute says you can have a zoning ordinance. 100-203 at the bottom says basically what you can have in the zoning ordinance. You know, stuff about signs and districts and lots and sizes and on and on and on. 100-205 is an interesting statute because it says when you're a joint planning commission like we are, and we have 3 different bodies, it says we don't actually have to have same regulations. But I can tell you it's super helpful to have the same regulations in your community. It's problematic when literally at the city line, you're like, we can do this here. You know, our R2 zone does this, but across the street, we're county side and our R2 zone's different. It's helpful to have the same zoning ordinance, but it's not required in the state law. And I bring that up because you guys, again, can choose to make your text amendments the way you all choose county side. But that's that statute 100-205. It says it's not required to have the same regulations. 100-207 is important because it tells us how we have to have hearings and notice, whether we do a text amendment or map amendment, and they're slightly different. Yeah. I jumped ahead. This is the next one. 100-211, again, is the procedure on how you guys are supposed to adopt these regulations. So there's a public hearing requirement and there's a way you all adopt them. So on the zoning map amendment, you guys know you have 90 days to act. On a text amendment, because you're creating new legislation, new law, you guys have no time limit. You guys act on this when you choose to act on it or not act on it or send it back to the planning commission. But what's interesting about this, and I highlighted this, text amendments don't always originate with the government. They can originate with the planning commission. They don't originate with citizens or neighborhoods. They can recommend a text amendment and work through their legislative body, say, hey, we should fix something, but they can't file an application saying we want to change chapter whatever. It originates with the planning commission or the governments. And some of the stuff normally would be us maybe doing housekeeping or you all asking us to. If it originates with the planning commission, you can see there's some verbiage there that you guys have to get it within so many days and all that. But 100-211 is how we basically deal with text and map amendments. So again, all that's just legislative stuff on where we get the authority to basically change this book when we change it.
Steve.
Yes, sir.
Judge, may I interject very quickly?
Yes, sir.
On that point, just to make sure for clarification purposes, main difference between a text amendment and a map amendment as concerns the fiscal court, they do have a duty to act within 90 days or else operational law kicks in. On a text amendment, it's basically like a proposal you take your time considering, or you don't have to consider. It
That's
takes
right.
an affirmative vote, a majority vote of the fiscal court to adopt it. So you've received this unless and until, and you're not under a timeline gun, except perhaps with medical cannabis, which I expect to talk
That makes it a
about.
little timely, yeah.
So on these other text amendment proposals, when you're ready is when you would vote on it.
Yeah.
So I
Give you an
just wanna
example, it's a
clarify.
great point. Mercer County, south of us, has been wrestling with their solar farm issue. And the fiscal court asked the planning commission to propose something, and the planning commission did, and they sent it to the fiscal court, and they were like, they didn't reject it, they just said, that's so bad, do it again, I think. Then they sent another proposal, then they formally rejected it. I think they rejected 2 or 3 before they finally got the last one that they thought, well, this one has some merit. And it took them almost a year to consider that. Bowl County spent 3 years working on their text amendment for their solar farms. The danger of that is, because that was a pretty serious text amendment, some folks can come in under the wire there if you don't get that legislation passed without a moratorium or some directive to pause those. And that's what's happened in Bowl County and Mercer County. So this text amendment, again, is housekeeping. It's mostly stuff we have, so we're good there. But if we were coming to, which is coming next month, a change to the in-family, when we bring that to you all, you guys might get it done in a month or 2. You may reject it. You might study it for 2 years. I mean, that's just how it works. All right, so let's get to this. And this kind of, I'm going to generalize all those pages real quick. So here's what the zoning ordinance update 2024 was really about. It was about reorganization. It was a housekeeping project. It was about what I call document readability for the layperson. I mean, I'm a planner. I struggled with this book trying to figure out why things flowed in the way they did. For the layperson, you can imagine it's problematic sometimes when the book just doesn't, things aren't where you would think they'd be in this type of book. The other thing is we wanted to define the legislative bodies and the boards. I don't know if you all realize this, but there was no language in the current zoning ordinance on what the legislative body's role was, or even who the planning commission was as far as the makeup of the board and who they are. So we put some stuff in a chapter where we had some extra space to define the boards, who the boards are, Board of Adjustments, Planning Commission, Architectural Review Board, that kind of stuff. We wanted to put all the review processes in one place, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. That was a major problem, in my opinion, with this book. I mentioned we wanted to establish traffic studies as part of the zoning map amendments. We wanted to require the posting of signs for CUPs. That's not required in the state law, but it's something we thought we needed to do to get better notice for conditional use permits. We also put in there new notice adjacent. The law says we have to notify adjacent property owners. We decided to go broader than that, and I'll show you that in a second. We found out Scott County was doing that. They go another 500 feet, so it's adjacent plus 500. We went and added additional notice requirement for zone changes and CUPs of another 200 feet. The last 2 bullets, we needed to redefine zoning permits slightly. We had to address paving permits. That was a loophole in the ordinance. And we had no verbiage about temporary uses or temporary use permits. And then lastly, we need to put verbiage in for the establishment of the medical cannabis regulations. That's why it's 84 pages that you all have, and not just the medical cannabis. And then here's the big problem. Again, this might just be a pet peeve with me. These are some of the processes that citizens or developers or property owners would look for. If you were looking for conditional use permits, you went to Chapter 4. Zoning map amendments, Chapter 9. Building, demo, grading, Chapter 3. Text amendments, 9. Development plans, 5. Variances, 4. Zoning permits, 3. Administrative appeals, 4. Historic overlay, 7. These are all processes that I thought need to be in one chapter. Then you can lead off with a chapter about applications and completeness and fees. And that's what we did. We put all these processes in one chapter. So most of what you got in this document is taking all these things from all these other chapters and putting them in a new Chapter 4, and that's what you have. Most of the stuff isn't new stuff. It just came from somewhere else in the book. And that's 90% or 99% of what you got in front of you, believe it or not. And then here's, just to show you, here's now how the summary lays out. Chapter 3 had all this other stuff, is now just new text about the legislative bodies, the boards, the actions that we take, the authority I have as planning director, and the authority the building inspector has under the state law related to the things we review. We also put all the enforcement provisions and penalties are in one place. They used to be scattered all through the book also. Chapter 4, Article 4, I'm sorry, is all the stuff I just mentioned. All the processes are in one place. You can see building, zoning, conditional use, development plans, zoning map amendments, text amendments, everything. In addition, that's where we put the new traffic study verbiage, the sign requirements, the additional notice, and we redefine development plans. Article 5 is where we already had a lot of what we call specific use standards. We clarified the temporary use standards. We made some minor housekeeping with sign regulations to deal with some banner signs we have popping up all over out on Lexington Road. We tightened with fixing one sentence, we're able to regulate banners a little better out here on our main thoroughfares. And we had to fix in the Ag Marketing Center, we had to delete the word equine per KRS 100-111 because it's an exempt status. And now the Ag Marketing Center just relates to stockyards, but the word equine was in there too, which was problematic because it's an exempt use. And we have a standardbred training facility being built right now that's technically ag exempt. If you read our book, it would sound like it has to be an industrial use. So that was a housekeeping. And then we actually added the medical cannabis verbiage at the very end of 5. And then Article 9 is no longer needed because that was one of those chapters that had other stuff in it that's now in 4. So it becomes a reserved chapter. And these are the signs that we're going to start putting out. Historically, we did signs for zone changes, and they were white signs with red letters, and you drove by them, good luck seeing them. I've had experience using these ugly yellow signs. I'm not a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I can tell you right now, but those ugly yellow signs with black lettering get people's attention. They stand out for a purpose. You can see them good at night. And so we've now got the zone change signs that's what we've been putting out city side. We never have put out conditional use permit signs, and we do dozens of conditional use permits a year. And all you do on a conditional use permit is you advertise in the paper and you, again, send 3 or 4 letters out. So going forward, we're now going to do signs for both, and they're going to be that style, and then we'll do more letters in a wider radius is the plan. But we do a lot of CUPs, and a lot of people go, well, I didn't know about it, or the signs work. We do 3 kinds of notice. We have to put ads in the paper for all our public hearings. And again, unfortunately, not a lot of people see the ads in the paper and the classifieds. We have to send letters, and those are pretty efficient. The signs work. More people will tell you, and the first time we did a conditional use permit sign, we did it for the church. It's going out on Clifton Road at the edge of the city limits. And several people said, wow, I saw that sign and I wanted to know what was going on. Now, we probably had more people in here than we would want to have, but that's what the whole goal is, right? To get the notice out, let people know something's happening out in the community and get them to the public hearing. So those are examples of the signs we bought. And then this last slide, we do have a future to-do list. One of is what you guys know is coming, and we're going to talk about here at the next plan, is to revise the ag exception lots, the rural subdivision stuff. That is coming to the Planning Commission next month. Chapter 2 needs to be revised. We got some definitions that need to be revised, modernized. There's a lot of new terms not in our book. Chapter 7 is where we would put this land subdivision stuff in the county, and then all the housing affordability verbiage that's kind of in play right now is coming our way at some point in the future, where we're breaking those into 2 processes. And then Chapter 6, the parking standards are completely out of date in terms, use of standards. It's not on my even to-do list today, but it gets brought up all the time. We have a variance next week at the Board of Adjustments. The way we do parking is use-based, for example, for apartments and not bedroom-based. There's a ton of stuff we can do in the parking chapter to modernize how we look at parking. So that's kind of our to-do list for the future. It's not something we need to focus on today, but except for that ag exemption stuff's coming your way in the next month. And that's all I have, Judge, unless you all have any questions on that. You got the whole document, and I'll be glad to answer any particular question. I'll go through the whole thing if you need me to, section by section, or point out some stuff if that's what you need me to do.
Mr. County Attorney?
Steve, if I could draw your attention,
Yes.
and for the fiscal court, page 5-33, the medicinal cannabis
Yes, sir.
facilities, 511.
Yeah.
When I read this, is this being submitted as proposed to what the fiscal court should adopt? To be consistent with City of Versailles?
Yes, this is a good question. This is exactly what the city did. So what it does is a lot of this is verbiage that came out of the state statute.
Yeah, the state.
But it's the only real way to understand the difference between a cultivator or a processor or producer, safety compliance. The real main stuff is on page 534. We wrote some specific use standards about some setbacks and other things. And then of all the main processes, we basically laid out what zone they're going to be allowed in.
And the reason I ask that though is it's redlined, so,
Yeah.
but this is already adopted in the ordinance for the city of
Both
Versailles.
cities, yeah.
So this is submitted, as it says at the bottom, Planning Commission recommendation draft for Woodford County, correct?
Yes, correct.
But, so on that next page, 534, again, as I understand it, you all just submitted what Versailles
Oh,
did.
I see there's a typo right there, yep.
Well, I'm specifically talking about 511.4, it should be medicinal cannabis facilities
Yep.
in the
Yep,
unincorporated
I see it.
area of Woodford County
Right.
are subject to that. And then under B, in the unincorporated
Yep, I see
area
it.
of Woodford County, they shall be prohibited.
Yep.
Anyway, so.
We
yeah.
missed that, and that's a good point. That needs to be changed. And the reason we did this one got tight because we waited to the election,
Yeah,
and we had the planning commission meeting the very next week. Had the election been negative, we would have not ran
Right.
this forward. So we just took the Versailles version and dropped in front of the planning commission.
I
as
think
a-
those were the only two
Yep.
referrals to the city.
Yep.
So we would want to just change that
Yep.
to like our petition was for the unincorporated areas
Yep.
of Woodford County.
Good
Okay.
catch. I'll make those changes if you
Okay.
guys adopt this, yeah. And again, any other sections, I do want to point out, and I'll just point out to the page here about the notice, because I think that's something that's been brought up. So if you go to page 4-1 in here, this is the new cover page that leads off the review section. So again, we get to use the same verbiage for applications, fees, completeness. But you can see right on that little chart on 4-1, we now show that conditional use permits have a sign requirement. And if you turn the page on 4-2, under mailed notice for zoning map amendment in number 1, C1 and C3, you see we're now going another 200 feet beyond the adjacent property owner minimum standard when we do our notice. And in the city, that's going to catch a whole lot more properties, but in the county, it may net the same. If you have a big piece of property, adjacent may still be the same amount of property owners. So we get that comment a lot, that people are like, why did he get a letter and I didn't? Kind of on the funny side, I normally hear that at a hearing, and I'll be sitting right there thinking, but you're here. You didn't get your letter, but you figured it out. But that's because the signs work, by the way, on the zone change. But I don't see it's a problem with going more notice. It goes above what the state law requires. It's more work for us, costs a little more money, but the more letters we can send out is probably a good thing.
And the judge is, and I talked about this, and I think he'll address it better than I would, but as far as the notice goes, the statute makes certain minimum requirements, and that's addressed. What other efforts are there, though, to notify the public? Is it on the website? Or is social media utilized? And the judge is far better attuned to this
Yeah.
than I am to comment on that.
No, well,
We talked about the ability to get the word out
I
there
agree.
beyond signs
I
and
agree.
letters.
So before this was even proposed, we've been doing the bare minimum. Newspaper ad, 7 to 21, letters and sign for a zone change 14 days prior, CUPs and variants. You pretty much, some things it's just the newspaper. There's some, for example, a development plan doesn't go through any kind of public notice because it's not a public hearing. Yet development plans can be kind of big things. So moving forward, yeah, I agree. Trying to figure out a way to do better notice. The letters were just a way to start. And then we know the signs work, but going to some other mediums I think would be smart. It's not required in the statute. Some developers might not agree with us. They're probably just assume we do the bare minimum. But I think if you can get the word out, let's have a public hearing. Everyone come on down to the courthouse. Let everyone say their piece. And at the end of the day, there's a vote, and everyone at least goes home and feels, they got to say something. Nothing's worse than to have a citizen call you after the fact and go, I didn't even know about the meeting. That's horrible when that works out. And historically, someone said, well, it was in the newspaper, you should have known. I don't think that's good enough. I think if we can do better notice, why not? And so I'm open to anything you guys might want to put in here for these applications. This is just what we started with, going 200 more feet. And again, Scott County's doing 500 feet. So we sort of copied this off them. I didn't know anyone was going more than the minimum. And then, of course, we got to do the newspaper, and then we do the signs. So the additional sign requirement, I think, is pretty cool. But we've always zoned the zoning map amendment signs, and I know they work the best. But no, I'm open to any suggestions, Judge, and the magistrate you guys might have on that.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. County Attorney. You know, I think that, you know, this is always kind of a work in progress, and this is moving towards a more notice, more accessibility, more openness, which I know the fiscal court appreciates, and I believe the city councils and mayors do as well. The one thing that you mentioned, I think that is extremely important, is consistency across jurisdictions. We don't have big differences, particularly on these small issues. So we should find common ground and keep them the same as much as we can, so that people can understand them easily. So my recommendation is probably that we would look at moving forward with this, and then if we want to add additional setback language, but I think in the meantime, we would encourage the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we as county government can take steps to put things on our website and our Facebook. But let's say, for example, we wanted to go to 500 feet like Georgetown or Scott County. I think we should work with the city of Versailles and the city of Midway to say, hey, we would like to do this. Would you all be on board with it? And if they don't, and we feel that we want to do that anyway, then we can move forward unilaterally.
Yeah.
But I think that they would be in agreement. But that's just one way to approach it. I did have a couple of questions, Steve.
Yes, sir.
Did any magistrate have a question? Want to go first? You're more than welcome. You mentioned that when you were talking about paving permits, you talked about a loophole. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So right now, yeah, it's a big one, Judge. It's a good question. So right now in our zoning ordinance, all we address are grading permits. So if you get ready to move dirt, you're supposed to come in and get a grading permit. Now, we obviously don't do small single-family stuff, but you know, if Kroger's decided to, I don't know, move some dirt around, or a factory did, we make you come in and get a grading permit, $75, and we look at soil erosion control. But if tomorrow Kroger's decided to pave another acre of parking, we had no requirement for paving. And the reason why we needed to become a grading paving permit, because if Kroger's gets ready to pave, that's the only way we'll catch the landscape requirement that's required. So right now, if you go out and pave, you know, you tear a couple houses down and you decide to blacktop the whole thing, there was no process that rolled through our office related to paving to either look at stormwater or landscape requirements. And the biggest violators would be commercial and industrial entities that go out there and just expand. It was literally a way to expand without having to come through and get any kind of permit. You only had to get grading. So if your project involved moving some dirt and then you were going to pave, we would catch it with the grading permit. But there's a lot of times they're not moving dirt, they're just literally blacktopping the backyard or something of that nature. So by making a grading paving permit, we now can catch any time they're either disturbing dirt or they're laying new blacktop down, and make sure they're in compliance with the stormwater, erosion control, and the landscape requirements for commercial entities. So before, you know, we would just look up and go, how'd that parking lot get paved? Well, they were just able to do it. We didn't want those to slip through. Normally we just want to make sure they're landscaping there, and it was all commercial stuff. It's never single family stuff. And we're not moving forward requiring single family. You know, if you have a gravel driveway in the city and you decide to pave it, that's not you're not required to come and get a paving permit. It's for the commercial stuff where you're disturbing. The way the verbiage is worded, you got to make a significant improvement enough that you're affecting stormwater management. And then you would need to come in and get one of those $75 grading / paving permits, and Mary Beth would look at it.
Excellent. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and
Yeah.
I think that's a big help. And I know in Mary Beth's work that'll
Yeah.
be helpful. You said you've changed the standards or modified the standards related to the development plans. Can you kind of give a
Yeah, so
nutshell of that?
Yep, so that's on page, I'll show you that. That's a good question, Judge. You're spot on here. Let me show you that. That's on page 4-17. So it's maybe it's just me coming from a different community. it was confusing to me. We had on a development plan, we use these different terms that are kind of confusing. We use the word preliminary development plan a lot. So if you do a zone change, you turn in a preliminary development plan. Sometimes you turn in a preliminary development plan when you don't do a zone change. And then there's a final development plan, but the old verbiage, the preliminary development plan and the final were the exact same thing. So there's times you do a preliminary, there's times you do a final, there's times, what really is the issue is there's a plan that needs to come in with a zone change, and then there's something once it's zoned that we need to do a development plan where they're getting ready to build. So all we're doing is changing the word preliminary and final to the word general and site. So a general development plan is what will come in with a zone change. It's more conceptual. It's, they're zoning. We don't know all the details. So that'll be a general development plan. A site development plan is when they're getting ready pre-construction, what we used to call a final. So that makes them different slightly. The other thing that we didn't have, and this became a real problem, but if you go to 418, 419, the elements of a site development plan are exactly the same of what we used to call a final. Everything that we want, it's a checklist, A through S. It's a lot of stuff you have to turn in with the development plan. You almost basically have to hire an engineer. These are bigger projects, as you guys know, shopping centers, apartment complexes. That's when you do site development plans. So all that's the same, it's just got a new name. It's no longer final, it's called site. Preliminaries are now general. But if you turn to page 420, this is a real problem we had in the ordinance. How do we amend these plans? And we had a problem down on the seller's property where Dennis Anderson's now developing. When you amend a development plan, it was unclear in the prior ordinance how you amend. The issue is we used two terms. There was a preliminary that was like a site. We could figure that out. But it's the one that came in with a zone change. When they want to change that, what was the process? It was our opinion it has to go back to the Planning Commission, just like the zone change. So if you adopt something with the zone change, it's locked in until you formally adopt it through a public hearing. Developers argued with us, said, no, we get to amend it like we do a non-zone change one. And we disagreed with that, but it was vague in the ordinance, so we worked with our legal folks, and we now make it very clear on page 420 and 421 how you amend a general development plan, which would be something with a zone change. You're going back to the Planning Commission in the public hearing. We're notifying neighbors, etc. On 421, if you're amending a site development plan, which was non-public hearing, there's the process how we amend it. You go back to the Planning Commission. And then the minor amendments that have always been vested in the executive director, we kind of clarified what I'm allowed to amend in-house. So there's three kind of amendments to development plans that were all pushed into one paragraph in the old book that were just problematic on what was the real process we need to tell the applicant to follow. So this just clarifies moving forward. Again, a general development plan is a little looser at a zone change level. When they get ready to build, they have to come back with a site development plan, and we got to see everything, stormwater, landscape, parking, buildings, all that kind of stuff. So that's the main change, Judge, of all that. The other thing with the old zoning ordinance, there were districts that were exempt. The old development plans were in some zones. For example, you had to do it in B4, but not B1 or B2. Now we put a threshold on what everything gets triggered for a site development plan if you're a certain intensity or not, regardless of the zones. So again, it was just housekeeping in nature. And again, we moved development plans to chapter 4 with all the processes, as opposed to it being in a different chapter. It was in chapter 5 all by itself. It was the only thing in that chapter that was a process. Everything was somewhere else in the book.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that clarification.
Sure.
Let me open it up to other members of the committee to ask any questions or recommendations that you have regarding these two items. Squire Gill, you're recognized.
Thank you. So this, from what I can tell, the articles that we're looking at right now, it's more process and responsibilities.
Correct.
And no real, we're going to get into all that in next month.
A little bit of standards in chapter 5 with the
Yeah.
medical cannabis and a little bit of tweaking of the ag marketing center and a sentence or two about signs. But yeah, everything, majority of this is what's going in chapters 3 and 4 are process-oriented stuff.
And the medical cannabis verbiage is pretty much recommended from the state.
The state didn't tell us how to pass it. They just said, they gave us guidance on you had to adopt something or not or put on the ballot. We created that ourselves.
Okay.
And we did that early on. Again, we heard about it in April, and I worked on that myself. And everyone was working on it. And I just, again, mimicked what was in the state statute and thought, well, this would help me understand what the rules are.
Okay.
It's a little lengthy, but, and then city attorney looked at it. Some other communities have borrowed it from us already. So yeah, that's what, it mirrors the state statute pretty much.
All right, Steve, any other questions or comments regarding either of these? Is there a recommendation from the committee to direct and authorize the county attorney to draft an ordinance with approval of the fiscal court amending Articles 3, 4, 5, and 9 of the zoning ordinance as recommended by the Planning Commission? Is there a recommendation of the text amendment to the fiscal court?
I'll make a recommendation.
A motion by Squire Gill. Second by Squire Blackford. Thank you. Open up the floor for any discussion on the direction to authorize the county attorney through a full vote of the fiscal court. Seeing none, then all the members of the committee who are present, please vote and signify on the motion on the table. In favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. We also need to recommend to direct and authorize the county attorney to draft an ordinance relating to the zoning map amendment and preliminary development plan for 9042 and 9048 as recommended by the Planning Commission.
Judge, I did have something to show them on that if they want to see the zone change.
We'll go ahead and that'll be the motion that we'll entertain, but I'll let you go ahead and explain that
Yeah.
for folks.
So I got a different PowerPoint on that one, just real quick, just a couple slides.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get ahead of you there,
Oh,
Steve.
no, that's fine. I appreciate it. Got it right here. I just pulled a couple slides from our meeting so I could show you exactly what this zone change is.
We're on the second.
So this is out on Clifton Road. This is the aerial here. There's 4 or 5 property owners that were all friends or something that moved here to Woodford County several years ago, and they all developed their properties all in this area. One of those property owners, I believe, passed away, and the property went to auction. And Mr. Markham, that's on the most western property you see there on Clifton Road, he bought this bigger tract that's labeled A1, as well as a 6-acre tract to the north. He's already sold that to a Mr. Brown. This whole zone change is going from agriculture to A4 to allow them to subdivide that middle parcel. It's in what we call the small community area, which makes it eligible for a zoning map amendment to A4. This shows the zoomed in version. The blue dot shows you the parcel there at the bottom of that small community circle. This is the Millville community area. This is what they turned in with their zoning map amendment. Again, their preliminary plat. They're basically carving off a 2-acre plus tract so they can sell the house independent of the rest of the farm, and then add that piece back to Mr. Markham's property. Couldn't do that because all the properties are zoned ag and they're non-conforming, so they needed to go through the zone change process to literally be able to carve the 2-acre tract and then replat it back to Markham's 4-point and some change tract. So that's what basically went before the Planning Commission. That's the zoning map amendment, and again, the Planning Commission had a public hearing. There was no opposition there. And they voted to recommend a recommendation of approval to the fiscal court for that zoning map amendment. And it's interesting, Judge, because we got 2 zone changes at this next meeting that you guys got the agenda that are similar in nature, where people are going from A1 to A4 to be able to subdivide property, as well as on this next agenda, we've got this another text amendment that deals with the in-family and these rural cuts. But we got 2 zone changes that are very similar. They'll be coming to the fiscal court in January or February if they pass the Planning Commission in December.
Mr. County Attorney, sir?
Could you please clarify what we received? The heading, I think, was utilized from the previous one sent and got to be changed out. And I've seen 3 variations of the addresses.
Oh.
I've seen 9042 and 9048. I've seen 9042, 9046, and 9048, and 9048. So could you
Yeah.
please clarify?
Yes, I have 9042 and 9048 were the 2 properties. I believe our 911 coordinator addressed the new track. It's being shown as 9048. Mr. Markham's property is 9042, and the track 3 that you see on that, do you have the 11 by 17, the plat? The 12-acre track shows an address in 9046. But at the time we were zoning it, there was technically only 2 properties until they subdivided. So there were 3 addresses assigned on this exhibit, but there were only 2 property addresses the day we zoned it.
So it's 9042 and 9048.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Apologize about that.
No, I just wanted clarification.
I just have a question.
I'm glad to answer any questions you all may
There you
have
go.
on.
If this goes to A4, can they subdivide this further?
They potentially could. They did show on that exhibit that there'd be 1 future building lot, but here's what's interesting about it. You're right, it's 12 acres, it becomes a 1-acre zone, so there's potential to subdivide further, but they're going to be limited by the road frontage that they have. And funny enough, there's 1 fire gate right here, right now. They all share this, because the property that's right here, the house that they're carving out, it's a bluff right there. So their driveways, they all share these easements. All these property owners share this one point where you see that fire gate up there at the top. I can't read it from here. 22 maybe, or something like that. So they all share driveways, and they all go off to 5 different properties, because that's really the only place they can access the road. But in theory, they could carve off as many lots as they have road frontage for. They indicated they're just showing 1 future building lot on this exhibit, but there was no commitment that they wouldn't do more.
And what is the road frontage requirement?
In the A4 zone right now, it's 150 feet. So they don't have a ton of acreage up there to create but that 1 building lot, but they do have frontage down here on the Clifton Road on the south that would count if they had access easement through somewhere else. But they're platting some of that frontage off to this new lot that they're creating. Again, if you go back and look at that. No, it's a bluff. That house they're selling like looks over. It's really scenic. But they all come from that entrance. But in theory, he's platted that back to his property. But so there's going to be frontage kind of all around the corner there. If you think about from 7 o'clock, if I'm using the clock here, all the way to 12, Mr. Markham's going to have frontage all the way around, and now he's going to have a, larger parcel that potentially could be subdivided if he can figure out to make the frontage work. He indicated his plan is never to do that. He wants to preserve everything and keep it together. But potentially, you're right, going to A4, it opens up the door that you could have further subdivision down the road. Plan is just to sell this 1 lot, is what he said.
Good.
Squire Gill? Good?
Yeah.
Squire Gentry had something. Mr.
I
County Attorney?
apologize. I just wanted clarification again for the ordinance I'm going to be drafting. For some reason, there's some inconsistencies in here. When it on the exhibits, it mentioned 19.473 gross acres. In the public hearing agenda item, it said 19.460. And I did wonder, did that include the 12 you referenced for 9046 or not?
It did.
So what is the total acreage?
Acreage is 14,943 is what was shown on the exhibit.
14,943.
Yeah.
That's for 9042 and 9048.
That supposedly was the entire property that you see on that legal description right there that Malcolm Endicott did up there at the top. He's showing that entire property up there was 14. I'm sorry, you got to add the 2 together. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's 19 and some change.
Yeah, so it was there were 2 references to 19.460 and 19.
The 19,473, I believe, is what's correct, because I verified that when I did the staff report.
And again, that addresses that 12 acres.
Yes.
So what this would address is that 19 point. You said the 473?
473 that's on the front page of the staff report
Thank
is what I verified.
All right.
And did in the legal description. When
Yeah.
the survey came in, there was a little bit back and
All right.
forth about the right-of-way up there, that one of the Ds went into the right-of-way, and we had to roll some of that back.
Thank you, and I apologize for interrupting.
No, and I apologize that there was some confusion. I'm not sure what exhibit, I don't think it was a staff report. I think, was that the recommendation letter from the staff? Yeah. Okay.
Squire Gentry?
Yeah, the landowner contacted me and they assured me that there would be no building up there. That's the reason why they purchased the rest of it, is so nobody else could build around them.
Yep.
And they just want to sell off that house because they didn't need the house.
Thank you, Squire Gentry. Other questions or comments regarding? Returning to the request for a motion to recommend to the fiscal court to direct and authorize the county attorney to draft an ordinance relating to the zoning map amendment and preliminary development plan for 9042 and 9048 Clifton Road as recommended by the Planning Commission. Motion by Squire Downey. Second by Squire Blackford. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please vote and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. All right. I know that, Director Hunter, we have a big agenda on Thursday, December the 19th.
Starting at 5 o'clock. We're going to
Starting
start
at 5
early.
o'clock. So we'll have a meeting on December 10th. And if you're able at that meeting to attend, or the pre-meetings?
I cannot be here December 10th. I'm out of town that week.
Sure.
So the week of December the 9th through the 12th, I'll be available on Friday 13th.
That's right.
Yeah, I have family issues.
You made me aware of that. I apologize.
I have to be out of town. So I'll be out that week, and I'll obviously be back in the office. I'm available, though, by phone or Zoom if I have to be.
Yes, yes. Well, I think the main thing that I'd like the fiscal court to know is that there is a big meeting on Thursday, December the 19th. I believe there are 2 potential zoning issues that would potentially be impacting the county, and the fiscal court would have to vote on those. That
As
will
well
take
as the
place.
text amendment.
And a text amendment.
And a new text amendment.
And that new text amendment is related to the in-family conveyances. I just as a reminder, I would emphasize that the court asked the Planning and Zoning Commission to look into this issue. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not take this up on themselves. In fact, they brought up the issue that it was being abused, and instead of, and in lieu of, a moratorium or some other sort of forceful action, we simply referred it back down to the Planning Commission, and this is going to be their recommendation. And as we mentioned, that doesn't mean we have to take it, but I do feel like that they are the ones that have done the work in preparing this and looking at the best possible ways. So I want to give the court full notice of that to make sure that everybody understands that there are issues that we will ultimately be voting on that are going to take place on that December 19th meeting. This is by way of notice. This is by way of making people aware. If there were any sort of letter or other notice that you did or did not receive, then you are getting that notice right now.
And Judge, it's a good point, because the advisory committee studied it for several months and came up with this recommendation, as well as a few other small things for the rural clusters. But we're going to go to the public hearing, so we don't know what's still going to shake out of the public hearing. We don't know if they'll pass it. You know, other text amendments have taken 1 or 2 or 3 months. Only a handful of the planning commissioners have seen this. So there may be some healthy debate just between the planning commissioners on what we're proposing as the option. It's different. It's really different than the in-family verbiage from before. And we're tightening down quite a bit the recommendation on the rural cluster developments also. So the 19th is the starting point of the public hearing process for the Planning Commission debate, citizens to attend and just discuss. And you might note on this agenda, there's 4 in-family conveyance requests that same night. I mean, these have been piling up on us month after month. There's 4 of them right there. So until we get something done someday, we're going to continue to see applications come on
And
in.
Director Hunter, can you share with me and the court the potential for in-family conveyances
Yeah.
and current land use in the county today, if everyone was taken up?
Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
new lots would we potentially create?
So I'm getting ready for the public hearing, and the judge is kind of stealing my thunder a little bit here, but he's asking these great questions. So I'm ready to show the planning commission at the 19th, and the advisory committee, we already kind of looked at this a little bit, and Kenneth John helped us with some maps, by the way, so we got exhibits. Right now, if every property owner utilized their in-family conveyance option, based 15 acres, 30 acres, 60, 100, there would be over 8,800 lots could be created, almost 9,000 lots. With the proposal we're bringing forward, it's 877.
Yes, that's a big deal. And I didn't mean to steal
No,
your
no,
thunder.
that we're going to
You're
show
not
the
gonna be
planning
there on the
commission
10th.
those
It's good
numbers.
for the court to hear
We're
it now.
scaling it back. For example, if you have a 100-acre farm right now, and you have enough family members, get creative, you could potentially do 15 in-family conveyance lots. We'd be changing that proposal. Right now, the proposal's 2. That's a big difference. So, Judge, so that's what we're going to do on the 19th, and I'm sure it's going to be fairly well debated and discussed, maybe tabled. I don't know when the fiscal court will get that. If everything goes well, you'd have it in January. If not, maybe it's March, kind of thing.
Well, Director Hunter, thank you. We appreciate it. That's going to be the conclusion of our ordinance committee meeting. I encourage any magistrates to meet with Steve with questions. He's a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate those that have reached out and met with him. That's a great way to get the homework done. Nothing else to come before this committee. We are adjourned. We will reconvene.